Everyone in the tennis press box this week is writing the same sentence about Alexandra Eala's Cincinnati draw. 17th seed, first round bye, projected smooth passage into the third round against an unseeded floater. That's the headline. I've read it 6 different ways in 6 different outlets over the last 2 days, and I think it's wrong, or at least dangerously incomplete, because the floater has a name now, and it isn't a stranger. Elena-Gabriela Ruse beat Magda Linette 6-0, 6-3 on Thursday to set up the match, and I want to be precise about how she did it, because a bagel first set against a player ranked in the world's top 70 is not a scoreline you get by accident. Linette had won 2 of her last 4 meetings with Eala herself. She's a battle-tested veteran, and Ruse dismantled her in 19 games out of a possible, well, you get the idea. That's the player waiting for Eala in Mason, Ohio on Friday. Not a name plucked from a bracket. A woman who just played a nearly flawless first set of hard court tennis less than 48 hours before she steps on court against the highest ranked opponent left in her half of the draw. So here's my problem with the consensus take. Everyone's measuring this matchup by ranking. Eala at number 20 in the world, Ruse at number 77. On paper, that's a 57 spot gap, and paper says this should be routine. But tennis doesn't run on paper, it runs on matchups, and there is exactly one player left in Eala's immediate draw who has already beaten her. It's Ruse. And I don't think that's a coincidence I'm allowed to wave off. Let's go back to where this actually started, because the history here isn't some footnote buried in a stats database. It's the origin story of Ruse's best tennis. 2 years ago, at the 2024 US Open, these two met in the final round of qualifying, the round players call Q3, the one match standing between a player and the main draw of a Grand Slam. Eala took the first set 6-3. Clean, controlled, exactly what you'd expect from a rising talent working her way up the rankings. Then Ruse did something that I think gets undersold every time this match gets mentioned. She won the second set 6-1. Not a tight three-setter swing, a total reversal, and she closed it out 6-4 in the third to take the match. Here's the part that turns this from an interesting head-to-head into something I actually find a little alarming if I'm thinking about it from Eala's side of the net. Ruse didn't just sneak through qualifying and bow out quietly. She used that win as a launching pad. She beat Wimbledon champion Barbora Krejcikova in the second round of the main draw, 6-4, 7-5, taking down a Grand Slam title holder with the same heavy first strike hitting that had just worked against Eala. She rode that run all the way to the third round, still her best Grand Slam result to date. So when I look at that 2024 match now, I don't see an isolated upset. I see the first domino in the best 2 week stretch of Ruse's career, and Eala was the domino that fell first. Therefore, I think the framing everyone's using, this idea that Eala is the overwhelming favorite because of a ranking gap, misses what actually happened the one time these two shared a court. Ruse didn't get lucky. She played the exact game she's built her whole career around, an enormous first serve and a forehand that just leans on opponents until something cracks. And it worked well enough to carry her past the slam champion the very next round. But here's the but, and it's a real one. Eala in 2026 is not the player who lost that qualifying match in 2024. She's coming off her maiden WTA Tour title in Washington, a run where she beat defending champion Leylah Fernandez, then Alina Svitolina, then Naomi Osaka, before coming back from a set down to beat top seed Jessica Pegula in the final. She extended that form into a 7 match win streak before a fourth round exit to Belinda Bencic in Toronto snapped it. This is a completely different competitor stepping onto Lindner Family Tennis Center than the one who dropped that qualifying match. The question I keep circling back to isn't whether Eala has improved. She obviously has. It's whether improvement alone erases a stylistic problem, because style, unlike ranking, doesn't just go away with a good few months, and that's really what this match is about for me. Not good player versus lower ranked player. It's counter puncher versus a player who has already shown she can punch first and land it. Ruse stands 1.73 meters tall, and she plays a lot bigger than that number suggests. Right-handed, two-handed backhand, and an approach that's almost entirely built around taking time away from opponents before they can settle into rallies. She averages close to 3.5 aces a match this season, which isn't overwhelming raw power, but it's not the number that worries me about her serve. It's the double faults. Ruse is averaging just under 5 double faults a match in 2026. That's a high number for a tour level player, and it tells me something specific about how she plays. She's not protecting her service games, she's gambling on them, going for lines and depth on both first and second serve, rather than parking a safe kick, serve out wide, and building the point from neutral. When that gamble pays off, she looks like the player who badgered Linette. When it doesn't, her service games become vulnerable in a very particular, very exploitable way. I keep coming back to her breakpoint conversion number 2. Ruse is converting under half her breakpoint chances this season, 48.4% by the tracking I've seen. That's a meaningful gap between opportunity and execution, and it tells me she creates pressure more consistently than she closes it out. If Eala can get to break points, and given how her own game has trended this year, with a much more assertive return position than she showed 2 years ago, I think she will get chances. The question becomes whether Ruse's highest variance stretches of a match happen to land inside those exact games. Now, here's the part of this preview I think almost nobody talking about this draw has actually clocked, and it changes how I read the whole thing. That 6-0, 6-3 win over Linette wasn't just a good result, it was a specific kind of result. Linette came into Cincinnati having lost 5 of her last 6 hardcourt matches. She was, by her own recent form, one of the more beatable seeded tier players Ruse could have drawn in round one. So I don't want anyone walking away from that scoreline thinking Ruse has suddenly transformed into a different, scarier player overnight. What that result actually tells me is something more specific and, frankly, more useful for predicting Friday. Ruse still has the exact same live arm, front foot game she had in 2024, and when her first strike hitting clicks against an opponent who isn't punishing her second serve, it looks like a bagel set. The variable that decides this match isn't whether Ruse can play well. She clearly still can, on command, right now, this week. The variable is whether Eala's return game, which has visibly matured since that qualifying loss, is sharp enough to turn Ruse's second serve gamble into the liability it's supposed to be on paper. There's a physical thread running under all of this that I don't think gets nearly enough attention in previews like this one. Eala is coming off a 5 set stretch of a different kind, not literally 5 sets. Tennis doesn't work that way, but a brutal compressed run, a 5 match title push in Washington, then straight into Toronto for a fourth round appearance, essentially back to back peak intensity weeks with almost no recovery window between them. That's the kind of schedule that either sharpens a player's rhythm because she's playing so much high level tennis in a row, or it quietly saps the legs right when an opponent like Ruse needs her to be at her most alert on return games. I don't know yet which version of tired Eala shows up in Mason. Nobody does until the match starts. But I think it's a real factor, and it's one that gets completely lost when the conversation about this draw is just 17th seed versus world number 77. Let's talk about what actually happens inside the rallies, because that's where I think this match gets decided, not in the pre match numbers. Ruse's whole identity as a player is dictating tempo early. She wants short rallies, 2, 3, 4 shots, and then either a winner or an error, hers or her opponent's. It barely matters to her strategically, because both outcomes serve her game plan. She doesn't want to grind. If Eala lets herself get pulled into that pace, taking the ball early and trying to match Ruse shot for shot in a first strike contest, I think that's exactly the version of this match Ruse wants, and it's the version that produced that 2024 loss. But if Eala can do what she's shown she's capable of doing against bigger hitters this year, absorbing the pace, redirecting with that backhand that's become the signature shot of her season, and forcing extra balls back over the net, she pulls Ruse into longer exchanges where the double fault numbers and the shaky breakpoint conversion start to matter a whole lot more than the first strike winners do. I also think there's a quieter tactical wrinkle worth flagging, something that doesn't show up in any highlight reel, but shapes how these points actually get played out. Ruse's backhand, by most tracking data on her game, is the significantly weaker wing relative to her forehand, more errors than winners over a representative sample of matches. If Eala's game plan on Friday involves consistently working the ball to that side, rather than feeding into the forehand that just produced a bagel set, that's the difference between playing into Ruse's strength and forcing her to manufacture offense from the side of the court where she's least comfortable doing it. It sounds like a small adjustment. In a match this evenly weighted by history, small adjustments are usually the whole story. For the tactical blueprint heading into Friday, I want you watching one specific thing that I haven't seen flagged anywhere else covering this draw. Eala's return positioning on Ruse's second serve, specifically how far inside the baseline she's standing by the third or fourth game of the first set. If she's crept in and is taking that second serve early, on the rise, that tells me she's actively hunting the exact weakness in Ruse's service games that the double fault numbers point to, and it's the single clearest sign that this version of Eala has closed the gap that opened up in that 2024 qualifying match. If she's sitting back, giving Ruse room to work with margin on the second delivery, that's the tell that this could turn into the same kind of low margin, high variance dogfight it was 2 years ago. Watch that positioning in the opening games. It'll tell you more about how this match ends than anything either player says in the pre match interviews.